Key Biscayne, Key Rats, welcome to another episode of Key Biscayne Stories, where neighbors meet neighbors. This is your host, Alejandro, and today I have Steve Baker, a good friend and neighbor. We're neighbors for a period of time here in the Key. He fights malaria in Latin America, specifically. And he's also a Rotarian, and he is part of RAM Global, which is an international Rotarian organization that fights malaria around the world. So, Steve, thank you for joining us today and sharing us your story. How are you doing today?
Real well, thank you, Alejandro.
This is exciting. This is interesting. Malaria. So let's dive right in. What was one of the hardest challenges you faced when you were fighting malaria?
So just really briefly, malaria is a really complicated disease caused by a parasite. And this parasite's been with us for probably 1 million years as we developed as human beings. So it's a tough disease to fight. And it takes a complex, because we lack a good vaccine at the present time for it, it takes a complex number of actions to fight it back. So the toughest thing that I've encountered is in Latin America is problems with getting governments, local governments, and especially federal governments to agree to let Rotarians do what we know we can do. And in some cases, like in Venezuela, we pretty much have to duck under the table to do a lot of the stuff that we do. We just keep under the radar so we don't run into trouble. We're going to do a project in Colombia, and I really wish we had better relationships with the federal government as far as the way we can go forward. But they are what they are. So we are unable to use all of the tools in our toolkit because some of those tools require government approval. That's frustrating. We know these things work because we've used them in Africa and they work. And anyway, so that's my biggest frustration, Alejandro.
So cooperating and getting the cooperation of local governments in Latin America has been one of the challenges.
Absolutely. It really is. And it's not my personal challenge because I don't live there and I'm not the one who has to deal with the governments directly. But when we're working through this problem or that problem, it often comes up, well, they won't let us do that.
Okay, I can see that.
How about we import 1,000 quick tests? Oh, they won't let us do that.
Okay, so it's not as okay. And quick tests are tests that help identify individuals that are infected with malaria.
So if you have a fever and you live in a place where there's lots of malaria, you want to go get tested. And there's two ways to do that. One of them is to go to some place where there's a microscopista who will take a drop of your blood, put it on a slide, look at it through the microscope and tell you whether you have the parasite or not, whether you have malaria or you don't have it, and which type you've got, because treatments are different for the different species of parasite. Or you have a little card, it's about like that big, and you take that drop of blood, put it in a little spot on the card, and within 20 minutes, it tells you whether you have malaria and which species you've got. Now, it's not as accurate as the microscope, but if you are out in an area where the nearest microscope is like a 10-hour hike away, it's a good way to project diagnosis out into the bush where there is malaria and there are reservoirs of malaria. So it's an important part of fighting. So do you want to get into the weeds?
Yeah, I actually just curious, what are the symptoms of malaria, or is it still fatal?
Absolutely fatal.
Okay.
Until very recently, millions of people died every year. The UN Foundation, the Global Fund, the President's Malaria Initiative, something that George W. Bush set up, and others have fought malaria back to the point where most of the deaths, probably 400,000 this year, I think, were in Africa, but there are still deaths all over the world in tropical countries. And it's a tremendous drag on an economy where there's a lot of malaria. because people get sick. I mean, they get sick to the extent where they can't work. When they're part of a hand-to-mouth economy, lying in bed all day for a month and a half or 2 months, it costs people. They can't get out in the fields. They can't get out and sell whatever they're selling or all that kind of stuff. So it's a very tough disease, and it affects mostly poor people in poor countries. So yeah.
Okay.
And so symptoms: fever, vomiting, anemia. If you get it, if it goes to your brain, madness, pain, unbelievable pain, and then death. It is a tough disease. I used to, before the pandemic, I used to go to Rotary clubs around South Florida and talk about projects I was doing in Venezuela. And inevitably, somebody would come up to me at the end. They were an older guy like me who went to Vietnam and said, my buddy died of malaria, or I was in the ward. I was there for a wound, and I was in the ward where they had the malaria guys, and they were screaming. Not a nice disease. And it's in Latin America, not here anymore, but it used to be in the US, used to be in Miami.
If I'm traveling in Latin America and I get it, what do I do?
Well, you don't know if you've got it. Okay, here's the thing. If you're traveling in Latin America and you get a fever, a high fever and vomiting, you need to go to a doctor and get tested. Okay. It may be malaria, but here's the thing. Before you go, find out if malaria is common in the areas you're going. You can take some prophylaxis if you want to. And there's things you can do to keep yourself out of problems. But malaria exists in certain geographic areas and doesn't travel readily. It does travel, but not easily. It's because it's carried by mosquitoes, and the mosquitoes don't fly more than about 1.5 miles. So if you're going to a place where there is malaria transmission, you need to be aware of that. And if you get a fever, you need to get concerned. If you're someplace where there is no malaria, like usually in urban areas, you get a fever, you still have to be concerned. You might have dengue. It's Latin America. You might have dengue. You might have Zika. You might have chikungunya. You might have yellow fever. So you get a fever and start vomiting, you want to get tested if you're in Latin America.
Remember, listeners, to plan your honeymoon in Latin America in the forest. So, Steve, how did you get into this?
So quickly, I was born and raised in Toronto.
Uh-huh.
My wife of 43 years, Peggy, was born and raised in Windsor, both in Canada. We met in Toronto, married, lived there for years. Peggy worked for Procter & Gamble there. Then she transferred to the head office in Cincinnati, and I moved with her and worked there. So, and then she got an opportunity to go international to work in Caracas. This was 2001. At the time that, it was the beginning of Chavez. 1999 was the beginning of Chavez. So it was early in his time. And at that time, the headquarters for Latin America for Procter & Gamble was in Caracas, one of absolutely my favorite city. Anywhere, anytime, beautiful city, a wonderful place to live. And we were there at a time when it was really still pretty great to live there.
Yeah.
And Peggy worked, and I took care of the household, and I was her security also. I made sure she got to work and back safely.
Good.
That we did our stuff without getting kidnapped. And but when she traveled, which was a lot, I had hooked up with a guy who, an Eagle Scout from New York State originally, who had a small plane, and he had a business, an ecotourism business. And he flew people into Amazonas state to Joramena, a Yaquana community. And I used to fly in there with him. And he'd take groups, but I'd help him prepare all of that. And for one of his groups who would go in there and meet the Yaquana and the Sanama people who lived there. But the two of us would also go out on because we both like the same thing, tramping through the jungle. We go out on trips and visit communities all over the Alto Ventuari. And we did that. We were able to do that because we were friends with Cacique Isaias Rodriguez. And he was a cacique of the whole area. And he asked us to see if we could help him with the problems that they were having with malaria in the area. They had no microscopista, they had no treatment, nothing like that. The shamans could take care of a lot of stuff, but malaria they couldn't. And so I got involved in it, and long story short, ended up bringing insecticide treated bed nets into the area because they are effective in preventing malaria transmission. Why? The only way you get malaria is being bitten by an infected female Anopheles mosquito, and they bite at night. If you sleep under a bed net, you don't get bit, you don't get malaria. It's that simple. So that's what we did. We brought them in, small scale project. And 2006, Peggy and I left Caracas and went back to Cincinnati. Peggy worked for a couple more years, and I continued projects there. She retired. We moved to the Key. Yeah. And I joined Rotary here, and we really were able to ramp up our projects from there and deliver a whole lot of nets. And in fact, from a start of a delivery of 50 nets, I think, to Joramena and Cacuri and the Alto Ventuari, we ended up with Rotary, with partners in Venezuela, Rotary partners in Venezuela, the Rotary Club of Puerto Ordaz primarily, but Cachamay also. We've delivered, and the Rotary Club of Iquitos in Peru, we've delivered about 100,000 nets. These nets really save lives. So I'm very proud of that accomplishment.
And pre-podcast, you mentioned you have delivered over 100,000 nets.
Yeah, 100,000 nets.
That's amazing. I mean, when you and I met, you told me about your project. You were already distributing nets. When
you and I met, we were doing like 6,000 nets in Venezuela. That was our largest delivery to date. But we really ramped it up when a company called Vestigard, who are one of the world's largest net makers, offered us free nets, nets that they had that they were unable to use for its original purpose. And all we needed to do was pay for the transportation to get them from Thailand to Venezuela. And we did that. We raised the money. We transported them to Venezuela in 2018. We got them into the country and transported safely. We never lost a net to thieves. They were transported to Puerto Ordaz, where they were kept in a warehouse owned by a Rotarian as we delivered them. And they were primarily delivered, for those of you who know geography in Venezuela, along the route between Puerto Ordaz and Brazil. That route is where there's a lot of gold mining. And where there's a lot of gold mining, there's a lot of malaria. And we delivered most of those nets to communities in that area through partners. We had a partner in Tumaremo at the malaria hospital in Tumaremo. And we had a partner, Doctors Without Borders, who worked out of a smaller town down a little further down from Tumaremo, where really at the center of a malaria epidemic. So yeah. And we brought the numbers down over a period of 2 years, from 2018 to 2019. Our net distributions really made a huge impact on malaria transmission in that specific area.
Can you share with us your first experience of delivering nets, from your idea to the work that you put in to actually deliver it to the actual like handing off of the first net? How was that?
Well, the very first ones were just a few of them that we gave to people to try to make sure that we had the design right. And the reason that we might have a problem with design is because people in these towns that I'm talking about on the upper parts of the Rio Ventawari, they slept in hammocks. They slept in hammocks. So it had to be made for a hammock, which is different than a rectangular net that's made for bed. Anyway, the first really impactful um, distribution, we did it in a town called Kakuri. Now, the guy I mentioned earlier, Cacique Isaias, lived in a smaller town nearby called Joramena. That's where our landing strip where we came in to get there is. But we did the distribution in Kakuri because it's a larger town. Joramena had maybe 40 people. Kakuri, probably one of the biggest towns ever in the history of Yukwana people, had about 800 people. And so we did it. We did the distribution there. We were able to fly in with a team of people. I made this arrangement with the local Ministry of Health guy in Puerto Ayacucho. We came in with vaccinators who had vaccines. We got some dentists to come with us from Caracas, and some other an eye doctor to come with us from Caracas. We had some glasses with us. We made it a big deal, and we flew into Kakuri on a caravan. If anybody of you out there know what that is, Cessna 208, and so it was room for all of us in our gear, and we spent 2 days distributing nets to about 800 people. And because these nets, we know that family groups sleep together in the Yukwana culture. So, and we did some research and figured out that each net covers about 2.5, 3 people. They'll either sleep together in the same hammock, mother and child, or they'll hang one hammock and then another one below it. This is typical. They did it even before they had nets because their houses are small. And they would hang them like that, and you can cover them with one net. Anyway, so we could basically covered 1,600 people that way, maybe a little bit more. And most of them were Yukwana, but some of them were also Sanama. And so to do this, we had a table. The pictures are great. We had a table with 3 people, myself and one of the older sons of Isaias Arrigas, who spoke both Yukwana, Spanish, not much English, and another guy from the community. And people would come, and we would give them their net, and then it would be explained about how to use it, and when to use it, and how to clean it in Yukwana, and off they would go. And we also had a group of Sanama, so we had to have a Sanama guy, because their language is different, explain to them how to use their net, etc. We had a sample net hung up. It was cool. It was very satisfying. The dentist from Caracas pulled teeth until he could not pull another tooth. His arm was hanging, by the evening. They have no dentistry there. So when people get a bad tooth, either they get somebody with a wrench to pull it out, or they wait until the doctor shows up. And we vaccinated hundreds of kids. That was great with, childhood disease stuff, but also yellow fever, which has plagued Amazonas forever, since the conquistadores.
Got it.
And that was very satisfying.
That's awesome. That's great when people do these kind of initiatives and help people around the world and most in need and don't have access to these things. So you've been able to do that and deliver these things to them. Regarding your deliveries, what was your shortest and longest delivery? Because have you used your own nets to sleep in as you do the deliveries as well?
The answer is yes, because whenever I overnight someplace where there's malaria, I do use a net.
Good.
Look, for those who are listening, there are 2 ways you can protect yourself from malaria when you're a traveler. One of them is pharmaceutical. You take a prophylactic drug. Mefloquine is the most popular. You take it every day. You start a week or 2 ahead of time and continue to take it for a while after you've come back. It prevents the malaria, but it has a very hard side effects, and many people don't want to use it, including myself.
Got it.
So the way I protect myself when I travel in somewhere where I know there's lots of malaria, and also I have to say somewhere where there's lots of dengue, because dengue is extremely dangerous. It's caused by daytime biting mosquitoes, so bed nets don't help you at all. I wear long sleeves. I wear long pants, even if it's hotter than hell, and I wear a hat, and I keep bug spray handy, and all of my clothing is treated with a with permethrin, which is a long-lasting insecticide that prevents bugs from staying on you. They'll land, but they'll take off immediately. And so, any of you want to know more about that? Check out insectshield.com. And that's how I protect myself, including sleeping under a treated bed net. And this is important. Treated bed nets are 50% more effective than untreated bed nets. They're treated with, again, a similar chemical to permethrin, and it keeps the mosquitoes off you. You don't get bitten, you don't get malaria. It's that simple.
Awesome. What was your longest delivery?
It took us 2 years to deliver 67,000 nets in Venezuela. 2 years.
Amazing.
Personally, the longest was 2 days.
2 days. Okay.
Yeah, the longest was 2 days. We did that. We did that twice. Once in Calgary, this was before Rotary, and actually the longest was 3 days. We went to a series of small towns south of Tumaremo on Route 10. It was about 50 kilometers north of Las Clarisas, for those of you who know the area. And it was a town occupied by Pemon people. That's a large indigenous tribe in that part of Venezuela and Bolivar State. And we stayed there. We distributed nets most of the day for 2.5 days. We had people coming in from Pemon, people coming in from other towns all in the area to do that.
Awesome. Steve, great. Wonderful. Wonderful. This is a great project that you have. And thank you for doing this. One of the things we like to do here in Key Biscayne Stories is talk about Key Biscayne. What are some of the things that we love about the Key? So, Steve, what do you do in the Key most of the time?
Well, my favorite things to do are walk around with my wife. We go for long walks as long as we can do that. And one of our favorite places, we live over in Commodore, so we walk over to the bird park often, or walk along the boardwalk, or walk through town and stuff like that. But for me, my passion is fishing, and has been since I was a kid. And here on the Key, where we're close to the beach, I can walk down and fish for bonefish and snook and other stuff right off the beach at low tide, on the sandbars. And I do that as often as I can. This year, the fishing hasn't been as good as some, and the sad loss of seagrass that this area is experiencing is impacted on the fishing. I also fish by kayak. I've paddled since I was 7, and I'm not 7 anymore. And anyway, I have a wonderful little kayak, and I'm able to drag it down to the beach and get in it and paddle out about 40 minutes. And that takes me about 2 miles offshore. And I fish in between 20 and 22 feet of water, and I catch all kinds of stuff. So it's a fun day. I only do that when the wind is 11 miles an hour or less, just to keep myself from getting bounced around too much. My kayak is a sit on top, so it doesn't matter if I get swamped. It just drains out. So and it's very capable, and I'm not concerned about dumping or anything like that. But it's really uncomfortable on high winds when you're smacked around. So I wait for calm days and go out on them.
Do you catch and release, or depending on what you catch, do you eat what you catch?
Yes and no. I release most of what I catch, mostly because it's undersized or out of season. So right now, grouper are out of season. Last time I went out, I probably caught 15 grouper, all of them too small to keep anyway. One of them was close though. And they're all released. They're out of season. I catch lots and lots of yellowtails, usually too small. Occasionally, I'll get a yellowtail that's big enough, and I'll keep that. And mutton snappers, again, lots of them, usually too small. Once in a while, once or twice a season, I'll get one that's big enough. But what we catch and eat are porgy. And there are plenty of grass porgy and jolthead porgy out there that are legal size and easy to catch. So when I go out, I usually come back with a couple, 3 pounds of porgy.
Now, fish, personally, I never really know how to make it, how to eat it right. I'm not a big fan, maybe because I just don't know. What do you recommend, or how do you eat your fish?
Well, I grew up filleting the fish that I caught, and that was all in freshwater lakes in Ontario, pickerel, pike, perch, stuff like that. And so that's the way I know. I've never been one to bake a whole fish or fry a whole fish. We used to do that occasionally, but not really very much. So my method starts with filleting. So whatever I catch, I'll fillet it right away, and then we'll do various things with them. Myself, I like breaded and fried, light bread and fried. My wife does it great. But we also will do things like Veracruz, which is done with a tomato sauce and olives.
Yes.
So that's another real favorite. And there's other things you can do with them. Baking, some of these fish are great. Once in a while, I'll bring home a Spanish mackerel, and if you fillet them right away and use them right away, they're really nice baked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had Veracruz when I worked in Colombia, in Cancun for 2 months. I ended up working there for 2 months, and there was a little spot next to the place I was staying where they had that fish at a Veracruz, and it was amazing.
Yeah, pretty much any nice saltwater fish can be really enhanced in a Veracruz sauce.
I can see that. And have you ever delivered nets in kayak?
No, but I have in dugouts. And when I say dugouts, I'm not joking around. This is a boat that was originally a log in the forest. It was cut down. It was scooped out and burned out and stretched by experts, Yaquana experts. It had a 45 horsepower motor. It was a 25 footer, so you could put 15, 20 people in there, or you could put a few people and bundles of nets and take them downriver, which we've done. I've done it on the Rio Cayuni, and I've done it on the Rio Ventawari and the Rio Manapieri too. Impressive.
Steve, thank you so much for joining us on the show and telling us your story. It's always great to reconnect, of course, with old friends. And this is a great project. Thank you so much for sharing your story with your neighbors.
Thanks for asking, Alejandro.